There's many, but I would say one treatment or approach to lymphoma today that probably sounded impossible 5 to 10 years ago is the fact that a patient relapsing with an aggressive lymphoma, I'll say diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, that, I'll use the word, can be cured without the use of chemotherapy, and purely novel targeted, and moreover, using the patient's own immune system.
In CLL, no patients are really getting chemoimmunotherapy today in the United States compared to 15 years ago. And when you look at the data, the majority of CLL patients are going to go on to live their usual natural lifespan compared to age-matched controls, which I don't think 15 years ago we thought was possible.
Lymphoma is one of the most transformed fields in oncology. CLL used to mean chemotherapy. Now it means choosing between 3 or 4 oral targeted agents that didn't exist a decade ago. Hodgkin lymphoma is one of the most curable cancers we have and one of the most complicated to survive. The field moved fast and not every institution kept up. New Jersey's only NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center is at Rutgers. And my first guest today is one of the people who helped build it into what it is. Andrew Evans is the Deputy Director for Clinical Services and Chief Physician Officer at Rutgers Cancer Institute. He's a physician scientist who has led more than 100 clinical trials, been NIH funded for 20 years, and somehow also has an MBA, a Master of Science, and a Bill Bradley Academic All-American citation from the NCAA Division II basketball. Alongside him is Joanna Rhodes, Director of the Lymphoma Program at Rutgers, one of the leading voices in CLL and bispecific antibodies in lymphoma, and someone who took a genuinely unusual path to get here. Alongside him is Joanna Rhodes, Director of the Lymphoma Program at Rutgers, one of the leading voices in CLL and bispecific antibodies in lymphoma, and someone who took a genuinely unusual path to get here. She worked as a clinical research coordinator at Dana-Farber before she ever went to medical school. She knew what she was getting into. This is the Moonlight Shift. Pull up a chair. Welcome to the Moonlight Shift. We have Dr. Evans and Dr. Rhodes here. Welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Gina, it's great to be here. Thanks so much. It's awesome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Oh, I'm so excited. The first Jersey duo that we have here in the studio for the show. So happy. I could talk all things Jersey all day, but let's keep it to food because food is fun. We'll open with some food. So what's your go-to pizza, I know we have a big bagel selection here in the state that's unlike any other. What are your top go-to places in Jersey?
So living in Hoboken, mozzarella is a very important thing. So Fiore's is my favorite personally, but shout out to Vito's for their amazing sandwiches. I always get the Sinatra with pesto.
So many choices. It's a really hard question. In kind of central Jersey, I really like Serenade. That's a really nice restaurant up by Livingston, one of our very large community hospitals. And then we have another in, I think, on the shore at Monmouth. And there's just so many places, Undici, Beach Tavern, where you can not just enjoy a great meal, but have an awesome view.
Can't beat it. There's just nothing like Jersey food. Last food question, is it Taylor ham or pork roll?
I'm gonna say Taylor ham.
Oh, okay, all right. No judgment.
We always say pork roll.
Okay. I side with you. It's pork roll, but that's okay. That's okay.
I need to hear from you good places to get it though. I'm sure there's better than other.
There's a lot, and yeah, there are also different levels of deli meat, or I like to say just cold cuts, and and the coffee. There's just something about it, especially on the shore. The food hits different.
The shore you're almost transported to a different world in some ways.
Yes.
It's awesome.
K-May is my favorite, and you actually don't even feel like you're in Jersey there. So, yeah. But I could talk food all day, seriously, but I definitely want to talk to both of you we have a lot, about your professional careers, the journeys that you've taken to get here, talking about the lymphoma world as it was and as it is now. So Dr. Evans, I'm going to start with you. So your previous lives, you were at Northwestern, you were at Tufts, and I would love to hear, what did you see at Rutgers, which, as we know, is New Jersey's only NCI-designated comprehensive cancer center. What did you see that as the right place to build this glorious program and institute that it's come to be?
Yeah, and it's as many places and situations. It's obviously standing on shoulders of those before you, but it's so hard to believe it's my 9th year being here, and I would say just in a quick response, what drew me is opportunity. And one thing that I was speaking with a colleague recently that I think sometimes even I forget, that this, yes, it's an NCI designated comprehensive cancer center. It's only been around 30 years or so. Bill Hite came kind of in the late 90s or so, and really within 5 years made it NCI designated. 5 years later, comprehensive. So we're still, like, I sometimes will describe it as rocket ship or multiple rocket ships. But I think that's the NCI designated comprehensive cancer center. To me, what maybe differentiates it as unique is what we call our oncology service line. And so, as I think you know, New Jersey is literally the most diverse state. It's the most dense state. And for the 11th largest state, it's interesting that there are not so many academic medical centers. You mentioned Tufts. In the little city of Boston, we have 5 academic medical centers. You know, it really is Rutgers. And so we have a really big network of oncology centers all throughout the state. Now 17 hospitals, including adult and pediatrics, and about 50 ambulatory centers. And Dr. Rhodes and myself are really responsible for helping to manage oncology throughout the entire health system.
It's amazing. And I can't believe that either, that it's only been around. You said 30 years? Yeah. Also, I want to talk a little bit about your degrees, because you have a very unique combination. You have a DO, an MBA, and an MSc. And I would love to know, how does that triplet affect how you lead and how you practice?
Yeah, like many things, that's been a little bit of a journey. So when I was at Northwestern, I was a fellow there and stayed on faculty altogether about 11 years. And as many people do, you can get this master's of science or clinical investigation. I did that during fellowship, was actually a little hard to do that. And I was really knee deep in the way the Northwestern model, at least in the blood cancers, is many folks had a lab at that time. Now this is over 25 years ago. It's a little harder to be a clinician and maintain a lab. So I was in that mindset. I had a lab, was doing a lot of clinical trials, cooperative group, a lot of investigator initiated. And I went out to Massachusetts a little bit more for an administrative opportunity, where I was chief of Hem/Onc there, the division at Tufts, and ultimately director of their cancer center. But when I came to Rutgers and RWJ-Barnabas Health, again, it was this opportunity of, do I continue down this path of translational research, which is great and needed and important, but for one reason or another, I just got really interested in the administration of healthcare. Because you could have the greatest, best, most novel treatments for a patient, but if you can't get it to them, wherever they are in their community, you know, it really takes all the way to the end. And so that's when I really took, it was right before the pandemic, actually, not because of the pandemic, where I had a huge career pivot. I sunsetted my lab intentionally and got an MBA, an executive MBA at Rutgers. I just felt like I needed a little extra training on some of the financial, the business, the economics, supply chain, and things like that.
That's so admirable, so different. I love that. Now, Dr. Rhodes, so I want to hear about your journey. You started as a clinical research coordinator at Dana-Farber. So let's talk about that. What were you initially kind of envisioning, and then what led you here to Rutgers?
Yeah, so when I finished college, I actually went and got a master's at BU, and I worked in a lab there thinking that I was going to do translational cancer research. It turns out I don't have great hands in the lab, and I just waste a lot of money. I'm not good at experiments, and it was a good thing to learn before I did what I thought I was going to do, which was actually going to get a PhD. So I pivoted a little bit, and I actually ended up applying to med school, or that was the plan at the time. And in between, I really wanted to understand the clinical trial side of medicine. And so I got this great opportunity to work in the bone marrow transplant department as a clinical research coordinator at Dana-Farber. Shout out to Dr. Philippe Armand, who was the first doctor who I worked with. And I found it really inspiring what they did there. You know, chasing the cures, you know, really trying to cure patients with acute leukemias and highly refractory lymphomas. And so I actually went into medical school thinking I was going to be a bone marrow transplanter. Pivoted a little bit later on during my fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, but I've had outstanding mentors along the way. including Dr. Steve Schuster, who was running the lymphoma program at Penn. And I kind of got the lymphoma bug. And then I also had a mentor in chronic lymphocytic leukemia specifically. And so when I graduated from fellowship, I had the opportunity to go to Northwell and to work at the CLL Research and Treatment Program with the Dr. Conti Rai, as well as Dr. Jacqueline Bettienzos, who is one of my mentors still. So it's been a really fun ride along the way. And then I'd been there for about 3 or 4 years and was approached by Dr. Evans as well as Dr. Matissar, who was taking the job as the division chief of blood disorders for Rutgers, to come and run the lymphoma program at Rutgers. And it seemed like a great opportunity to work with people who I was so inspired by at the time, and still am, to really try and spread my wings and leave and continue to have an expertise in chronic lymphocytic leukemia, but also get to continue to explore my love of taking care of patients with other lymphomas like B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, Hodgkin's lymphomas, and even now T-cell lymphomas.
Well, that's what I think is so beautiful about what you said. You've been able to experience all of these different areas and have all these different mentors along the way, which I definitely want to dive more into. So thank you for sharing that. That's great. Now, I want to talk about the relationship between the two of you. Very strong, obviously, working relationship. But when you both started really working together, how did you kind of realize, like, oh, we're a very powerful dynamic duo? How did that kind of shift happen?
Yeah, it evolves, I think, over time. I mentioned I was the chief of the division at Tufts. I was kind of a younger chief, but around age 40. But when you get in that mode, recruitment is a key. And I don't remember the exact timing of your fellowship, but you really start scouring the earth. I mean, mainly the United States, looking for talent. And I just remember Dr. Rhodes as a fellow, actually, because I had some interactions with some colleagues there, because they'll talk about the rising stars. So she was absolutely a rising star, and you kind of keep your eye out. And I thought I might have sent her something to try to get her to Tufts, but she went off to a good green pasture at Northwell. So we were lucky to be able to recruit her back. When, as she mentioned, Dr. Matissar came, he was one of our first big recruits to run what we say blood disorders. That includes hematologic malignancies, bone marrow transplant, CAR T, as well as classical hematology. And we needed someone to really carry the light for lymphoma, and there's no one better than Dr. Rhodes.
Thanks, Andy. Andy and I have had the opportunity to interact both from a research perspective and collaboration. We both have given talks together. I've learned a ton from him, even just from that. And so when the opportunity came up to work with Andy, I thought, well, what could be better? It's very important, I think, particularly as a female physician, to find leaders that are he for she, and really promote women and their leadership. And I think that Andy has done a great job of that for me personally, as well as for so many of the other women, I would say, within our division.
Did we do some real world stuff together
we
back
definitely
in the day?
did.
Remember that CLL one?
We did a ton of real world stuff together, and then we've talked a lot about Hodgkin's together.
Yes.
So it's been really fun to kind of.
I don't know if we called it real world at the time. We just said retrospective multi-center.
I'm trying to remember when the real world thing came out.
Yeah.
I love this, so thank you. We mentioned how Rutgers and New Jersey, very diverse state. Who would you kind of define as a patient at Rutgers? What do they need that they can't get somewhere else, but they can get at Rutgers?
We have a little bit of a tagline, but we actually mean it in that we say cancer doesn't travel well. You could probably say healthcare doesn't travel well. Keep cancer care close to home. And so I don't want to talk about other institutions, but our motto from day one how do we engender that? In other words, yes, we have a beautiful new $900 million freestanding, one of only 13 Jack and Cheryl Morris Cancer Center, fantastic. And if a patient or family want to come for initial, second, third opinion, happy to help. But our intent, one of the first questions, besides talking about why they're there for the diagnosis, is where do you live? And most live in New Jersey, some come from outside New Jersey. We're starting to develop that national reputation. And now that we have a network, literally, of almost 300 oncologists throughout the state and 150 oncology nurse practitioners, our goal is, if the patient so desires, is to have that care close to home. And so that's a little easier said than done, because how do you have the team, the doctor, the medical record, and importantly, access to clinical trials? And so that is something that we've also been super intentional about. And it took a while early in the time then when we arrived, but our team now throughout the state and RWJ-Barnabas Health, in collaboration with the Rutgers Cancer Institute, have a single IRB, master contracts. And so we have around 300 therapeutic clinical trials in New Brunswick, and not to say all 300 would be open at Long Branch or Jersey City or Livingston or Hamilton, but they can open the ones that make sense to their populations and open it like that. And moreover, Gina, there's even been times where maybe they didn't appreciate a certain diagnosis, because it's getting very technical on clinical trials now, like down to the molecular level. So sometimes I saw a patient recently with mantle cell lymphoma, elderly woman, drove up an hour and a half from Toms River, which I know is your neck of the woods a little bit, and she wanted to enroll on this new immunotherapy, and we were able to open it at her local center within about 10 days' time. So she didn't have to travel back and forth for the frequent visits and other treatments.
It's amazing.
It is.
Oh, so great to hear. So let's talk a little bit about progress in CLL also. So CLL used to mean like chemoimmunotherapy, right? And now a patient can walk in and they can almost have, I don't want to say have their choice, but there's a selection of different oral targeted agents that might be available. Now there's like some fixed duration types of regimens. So when you sit across from a patient with newly diagnosed CLL, what does that conversation actually look like?
It's a much more nuanced conversation than I think it was many years ago, or not even that many years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years ago. So it's been really fun to do my training during this time where we've really seen the care of CLL patients be revolutionized by these targeted agents. So originally with ibrutinib, our first generation BTK inhibitor, then next to market that we still use is venetoclax, which was FDA approved in 2016. And we're just getting better at using these agents in combinations and in managing their side effects. It's a long conversation. Now we have 2 different fixed duration regimens that are FDA approved, another one that's on the NCCN recommended guidelines. We have continuous therapy. So there's a lot of things that go into play. When I sit down, I talk to a CLL patient, and when I even talk about, how do you choose between frontline treatment regimens, it's patient choice at this point right now. There are some factors that will come into play, concomitant medications, patient age, how far they are from the center that they're going to be receiving their treatment to be able to maybe do a venetoclax ramp up, how often they want to interact with the medical system, which is the thing I talk a lot about. And then also any potential financial toxicity that can come with continuous treatment. So we talk about all of those things, which of course is a pretty nuanced conversation and one that is very specific to each and every patient. I think it's really exciting to be able to have those conversations because we don't get to do that in a lot of different treatments for cancer. I remember sitting on a panel and I was sitting with a sarcoma specialist, a pancreatic cancer specialist, and I was talking about choosing between medications based off of side effect profiles and not just because they were both so effective. And everyone looked at me like with just jealousy because we've made such strides in CLL based off of all of the research that's been done over the last 2 decades.
It's the epitome of shared decision making.
It really is.
I mean, and it's, at least that's how it should be. And it takes time, like you said.
It does. Now when I meet a CLL patient, even a year before I think they might need treatment, I start to kind of talk about these are what treatments are, this is what it looks like, because when you meet someone with CLL, particularly if it's the first time and they're a rise stage 0 or they really just have an elevated white blood cell count, and this was sort of an incidental finding, we talk so much about active surveillance or watch and wait, and it's a really hard thing to tell someone, hey, you have leukemia, but you don't need treatment right now. And I think from a patient perspective, early detection, early treatment for so many other cancers is so important. And it may be in the future that the research shows us for certain CLL patients that's true. But so having those conversations, I think, has been one of the ways that shared decision-making in my own practice has really become so important.
It's very complex, but it's one of those situations where you say, oh, this is a good problem to have. You have so many choices, and like you said, you're talking about side effect profiles as like the distinctive factor. And if you broaden that to, let's say, like relapsed refractory large B-cell lymphoma, where we're having the conversations of CAR T or bispecifics, and then you have to shift, and like what does, almost like who usually wins, like how does that kind of go? Because it's two very different treatments, too, that have become very effective for a lot of patients. So how does that kind of, I guess, decision-making come into play?
It's somewhat similar. Now, there is not a watchful waiting period. I mean, obviously they're more aggressive and treatable, hopefully still curable, even in the relapse refractory setting. So I would just, and maybe not as many choices, but still choices. And choices meaning, okay, if there is a relapse after initial treatment, then it usually is a little bit of a choice between bispecifics or CAR T. I still think more often than not, CAR T is often a little bit in front, at least it has a little bit more of a track record. But then you also have the secondary choice or decision making of, okay, if it's CAR T, what am I gonna do for bridging therapy? And how do I get a patient? Because it still is 3 to 6 weeks sometimes to manufacture those cells. And of course, clinical trials. And there are so many new constructs of not just single, like the commercial ones now that are CD19, there's dual, there's tri, there's natural killer cell. So really an exciting time of how we start to cobble these together in a strategic, smart fashion.
How do you kind of, there's so many available, really, and I've only been in this field and on this side of it 11 years now, and I can't believe how much has changed from 2015. How do you kind of make sense of, like, is it really like truly like a tailored decision for each patient?
I think so, because there's no two lymphoma patients, whether it's an indolent lymphoma patient or an aggressive lymphoma patient, that's the same. And one of the things that when I talk to colleagues, about, CAR T versus bispecifics, a lot of it really does have to do with access, as Andy has pointed out, that like we have these wonderful, treatments, but not everybody can access them. And so the way that I look at the decision between CAR T and bispecifics now is, what is the patient going to be able to do? Can they get to the specialized center? We've improved access so much with the decrease in the time that patients need to be within, the 90-minute radius of their CAR T-cell center. The REMS programs have virtually been removed, which allows an improvement of access just from a systems perspective from each facility that's giving CAR T. But we're in the state of New Jersey, and so it is dense, but it's still a small state. And so end to end, it's about 4 hours. And I think about access, not just in New Jersey, but also across the country, where the nearest CAR T-cell center maybe a plane ride away, maybe 6 hours by car. And that's a problem in terms of access if you have to uproot your life and the life of your caregiver in order to be able to get this. And so bispecifics, I think, are gonna fill a hole for, the majority of patients that are unable to get to CAR T for various reasons.
But we are working on that. So just building upon the oncology service line theme, is we're about an eyelash away, a few weeks, if maybe a month or so, from starting CAR T at 2 of our community sites, one at the Cooperman Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston and the other at Monmouth Medical Center in Long Branch. Obviously, carefully and in collaboration. And then I would just say, yes, it's individualized, but we're so lucky, to have great lymphoma experts, Dr. Matisar and other hematologic experts, pathologists, because we bounce a lot of ideas and thoughts and questions off of each other. And we, of course, have a weekly multidisciplinary tumor board, or lymphoma, where there's 30 folks on the Zoom now and go through every case, pathology, imaging, and so much of that just kind of back and forth. And because there are many nuances and subtle, and maybe I didn't see a new abstract that was just presented or a meeting here, because yes, we want to be rooted in evidence-based medicine, but you also want to be on that leading edge.
Absolutely, I think that's such a good point. I'm going to pivot to Hodgkin lymphoma. Very curable, but very complicated cancer. A lot of also different side effects that can happen very later on after treatment. How would you define kind of progress being made, and especially as it relates to like identifying and paying attention to a lot of these late effects that patients experience?
Yeah, there's probably two sides to it. First, of course, is, well, let's have the highest possible cure rate. And it's really so happy to say now, even for advanced stage 4 disease, that we are curing north of 90% of patients. And that's been, yes, there's still a chemotherapy part of that, but obviously immunotherapy, targeted therapeutics. So that's kind of the 1A, and the 1B to that is we're not stopping. And that's for advanced stage disease. There's, as Dr. Rhodes knows, an ongoing national clinical trial for early stage Hodgkin lymphoma called AHOD 2131. You hear AHOD, and that's the pediatric group, but all the adult groups, we're all collaborating on that together. It's down to ages 5 up to age 60, and it's incorporating 2 novel agents where the kind of general standard of care, not on a clinical trial for early stage disease, is you might need anywhere from 3 to 6 months of chemotherapy. And what this study is doing is incorporating a checkpoint inhibitor and antibody drug conjugate with only 2 months of chemotherapy. And it's a superiority study. In other words, we're not just trying to cut the chemo down by 2/3, which will be huge, but also do it in a better way. So that's ongoing. We've enrolled collectively as a country about 1,000 of 2,000 patients planned. So we're gonna keep pushing that envelope. And maybe, I hope, before our careers are done, we could say we could cure this without classical chemotherapy. But you have to do it carefully. We don't want to kind of drop down on any cure rates. But then, Gina, you mentioned the second point is, well, gosh, if you're curing more than 90% of patients, and the majority are patients in their 20s and 30s, great. Well, that means they're going to live another 50, 60, 70 years. And we know, albeit from data, patients treated in the 70s, 80s, 90s, there are these what's called late effects, or what also kind of reframed sometimes as post-acute and late effects. And because when sometimes people hear late effects, they think of, well, that's 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Heart disease related to anthracycline, lung disease, infections, second cancers. But a lot of great research has been done to show that the survivorship or so-called secondary side effects probably start 1 year after treatment. Increased heart attacks, increased pulmonary, increased, you name the organ. And so we're kind of reorganizing, and we have a really nice survivorship clinic to kind of almost bring survivorship forward, not wait for 10, 20 years later, and try to understand that more.
I love that. I think that's very important, is to start talking about survivorship basically from the moment you're diagnosed as well. Yeah, okay. Now, if you fast forward 10 years, what does a lymphoma patient's experience actually look like? What's different from today? What do you each need to see happen in order for us to get there?
Gina, that's a great question. And obviously we talk about targeted therapeutics, and yes, we have so many targeted therapeutics, but I still really am hopeful whether we use the term individualized or more personalized. In other words, let's say we have Hodgkin lymphoma or diffuse large B-cell, follicular, you name the lymphoma, and we have 3, 4, 5 choices. Right now it's a little empiric or kind of historical on which one you choose for which patient. And so to me, that still is a bit of one of a few holy grails of, can we take the patient's tumor information, maybe even their host genetics to predict late effects, put it all together, whether we use AI or not. I mean, there'll need to be some machine learning to kind of understand that, to at least maybe not say this is the best drug or the only targeted medication, but at least give me something directional based on that tumor tissue. We talk about translational or biologic implications. And I know other cancers are already down that road. And so I'm really hopeful that that's the next step we kind of continue to take or continue to evolve. Of course, there's also ctDNA where that can be done, not just from a quantification, but actually diagnostic and directional as well.
I agree. I think in a lot of lymphomas, we already do a very good job of getting people either to their natural lifespan or curing the majority of patients with frontline treatment. I think the question is, how do we predict who our current standards of care are not enough for, and then really target our treatments differently for those particular patients, whether that's based on genetics, tumor subtypes. And then I think one of the things that Andy pointed out is, can we de-escalate therapy for certain patients who are destined based off of their tumor type or genetics or lymphoma biology to do well no matter what we do? Because we're giving patients anywhere from 3 months to 6 months of treatment, maybe then they need a cellular therapy. So who are these patients that we can really figure out with all of the treatments that we have, what's the best sequence of medications, and how do we, in particular for aggressive lymphomas, one and done, cure them up front, and that way we're worried about survivorship and not about relapse.
And Joanna mentioned also earlier about side effects on toxicity panel. So in this hopeful near future state where we can really have directional, if not information to say which targeted, obviously the hope and expectation with that, Gina, is that we have quality of life data with that. I mean, it has to be part of the calculus because so many of the different treatments have pretty comparable effectiveness. So yes, we'll look at frequency and time needed to come to clinic and side effect panel.
Very, very well said, both of you. Thank you so much. I totally agree. Now, before we wrap, I want you each to say one thing to each other that maybe you haven't, hopefully that you haven't said before. Not to me, not to the audience, just to each other.
Okay, do you want me to, who's starting?
Whoever you like.
So I'll start, and I'll say, Joanna, I think I've mentioned this a few times. We are so happy to have recruited you. I've admired you, as I said, a bit from afar. We did some real world stuff early on when you were a junior faculty, but just so happy for you, your career, and really proud of this kind of I think, evolution you're taking in terms of a leader and being a healthcare leader. And like we talked about before with Gina, that yes, we want to be at the cutting edge of discovering new treatments and tolerable treatments, but how do we do that in a day-to-day, hour-to-hour setting within a complex clinic and also a complex health system? And you're just doing an amazing job, and I'm so thankful for you.
Oh my goodness, I'm gonna blush. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity. I think when I was looking for a new opportunity, I didn't even know what I was looking for, and you and Matt really created a place where I could come into my own and really gave me the space to develop my own leadership style and build the program out the way that I see it moving or what I hope to see. And then by giving me a systems role, really allowing me to take the reins with trying to really build out lymphoma care across the state, which I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, and I think thank you so much for that. I think too, we talked a few times about administration and healthcare. I think it's so messy and difficult sometimes when we think of medical records, insurance companies, administrators, everything. And so I'm a real big believer, as you can tell, Gina, of really having physicians as part of that, at that table and discussion. Because we can sit back and complain, and yes, there's some immovable objects, but I think, Dr. Rhodes is a great example of being at that table, thinking outside the box, and how can we help each other, and at the end of the day, help patients navigate physically, emotionally, everything related to cancer.
I'm telling you, dynamic duo, really, truly, but very, very powerful and really shaping not just healthcare in New Jersey, but I think really making a repeatable model for other states to follow as well. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The name of the game today is called Same Page or Different Chapter. Do you like my flashcards?
I love the flashcards.
It's good.
All right, so
Very game show.
Printed here, I'm sure.
Yes, of course.
We saw the
Primary
print shop.
shop.
We saw the print shop.
Yes,
Impressive.
it's beautiful. Yes,
It's very cool.
All right, so we're going to read 5 statements. I'm going to read a statement about lymphoma or about the field more broadly. You each answer at the same time. Don't look at each other. You can agree or disagree. If you're on the same page, you move on. If you're on different chapters, you'll each get 15 seconds to make your case. Number 1, BTK inhibitors should be the default first-line choice for most CLL patients today.
Different chapter.
Different chapter.
Okay, all right, easy start, good. Fixed duration therapy will replace continuous therapy as the standard across most lymphoma subtypes within the next 5 years.
Same page.
Okay, 2 for 2, all right. CAR-T will eventually replace bispecific antibodies as the preferred immunotherapy option in relapsed refractory large B-cell lymphoma.
Same page, but it's already, yes, same page, sorry.
Different chapter.
Go, yes, all right.
But can you say it again? You said is or will?
Will eventually replace.
I think it's the de facto first or second line treatment for patients with refractory large cell lymphoma and for patients that have relapsed who are older. currently. So my de facto is to go to CAR T. I think at some point we're going to be using less CAR T for the fact that it is expensive, it is personalized, it takes time to manufacture, and the access to CAR T outside of major academic centers still remains so limited. So my hope is that we're actually going to try and figure out how we use bispecifics in a curative setting for relapsed disease. But I also think we're going to be using a lot of bispecifics in the frontline setting, and so my hope is that we're actually going to need fewer and fewer things in the relapse setting moving forward.
So that was more than 15 seconds.
It was.
That's okay. That's all right, but she's allowed. No, it actually,
It was a good
how can you
answer.
explain it in 15
Yeah.
seconds?
I know,
But-
I know.
So I won't say I was going 3D, 4D. So I was answering that assuming, as you said, bispecifics were going to go frontline, not to say we won't have new bispecifics. Yeah. So I was kind of making the semi-assumption that in the very near future, next couple of years, bispecifics will be part of the frontline setting was kind of one thought I had. And the second is, you're absolutely right with having to manufacture, but I'm really hopeful, maybe naive, that we'll have more off-the-shelf CAR T options. You'll be able to not just have quick access, but also more predictable tolerability so even community sites can administer.
Honestly, both very solid answers. All right.
More aligned than not aligned, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hodgkin lymphoma survivorship deserves its own dedicated specialty within oncology, separate from the oncologists who treated the disease.
Same page.
Agree. Or same page.
Sorry, I'm like, wait.
Yes,
Yes.
but that's easier said than done, I'll say, because at a big academic medical center, we're able to engender that. What I hope is that there'll be more resources for the community oncologist, maybe even virtual assessments, because it is amazing the detail down to not just a milligram per meter squared of anthracycline, site of radiation, family history, just holistic integration that these survivorship physician experts are able to accomplish with each individualized patient.
Okay, last one. A lymphoma patient in New Jersey gets care equivalent to what they'd receive at an academic institution elsewhere.
100% agree.
Very good. Thank you both so much. That's our wrap on Same Page, Different Chapter. That's our wrap on the Moonlight Shift. Thank you so much, Dr. Evans and Dr. Rhodes, for coming on today. We had a great time. Thank you. I hope you come back again.
100%.
Yes.
We're right down the road.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.